Have you ever wondered what happens when two people who promised forever to each other decide to walk away, not just from their marriage, but from God Himself? Does heaven keep a record of vows broken in the same moment faith is abandoned? And if there's a place where souls who turn their backs on both love and grace end up, what does that place look like? Throughout history, the Church has witnessed countless marriages crumble under the weight of pride, betrayal, and spiritual indifference. But few people understand that when a couple abandons their sacred bond, they often abandon something far greater, their eternal souls. His name was John Bosco, a man who dedicated his entire life to saving young souls from damnation. On the night of April 10th, 1868, during Holy Week, God pulled back the curtain between earth and eternity and forced Don Bosco to witness something that would change him forever. He saw hell. He saw the traps that drag souls into the abyss. And among those traps, he saw something that terrifies married couples to this day: the invisible snares that catch husbands and wives who abandon both each other and God at the same exact time. It is the best way to support our work. Also, comment from which city you are hearing this from. Also, this script is researched and factual, using sources from the biographical memoirs of Saint John Bosco, compiled between 1898 and 1939 by Father John Baptist Lemoyne, Father Angelo Amadei, and Father Eugenio Xeria, as well as the direct transcripts from Don Bosco's own narration to his students on May 3rd, 1868, preserved in the archives at the Salesian Mother House in Turin. These are not secondary sources. These are the first-hand accounts written by men who lived with Don Bosco and recorded his words the day after he experienced the vision. Now back to the information. He was 52 years old, and he had spent decades caring for hundreds of abandoned boys in the slums of Turin. He did not want to sleep. He knew what sleep would bring. For several nights in a row, he had been tormented by dreams that left him more exhausted in the morning than if he had worked all night. These were not ordinary dreams. They were visions, and they were killing him. He sat at his desk until midnight, browsing through books, trying to stay awake, but exhaustion won. He set his pillow upright against the headboard and tried to sleep sitting up, hoping that would prevent the nightmares. It did not work. The moment his eyes closed, a figure appeared beside his bed. A man. The same man who had visited him the nights before. Don Bosco called him the guide. Some believed it was an angel. Others thought it was St. Francis de Sales. Don Bosco himself did not know for certain. You will see. The road ahead was beautiful, wide, neatly paved. Both sides were lined with magnificent green hedges, dotted with gorgeous flowers. Roses peeped everywhere through the leaves. At first glance, the road was level and comfortable. Don Bosco ventured upon it without suspicion, but soon he noticed something. The road was sloping downward. It did not look steep at all, but he was moving swiftly, gliding almost effortlessly through the air. He was hardly using his feet. As he looked at them, he noticed now one, now another, fall to the ground and instantly be dragged by an unseen force toward a frightful drop in the distance. The drop sloped into a furnace. They sprawled to the ground, legs in the air. Then, when they managed to get back on their feet, they would run headlong down the road toward the abyss. Some got trapped by the head, others by the neck, hand, arms, legs, or sides. They were pulled down instantly. Just some filmy fiber, Don Bosco answered. He pulled harder, only to feel that instead of drawing the thread closer, he was being pulled down himself. He did not resist and soon found himself at the mouth of a frightful cave. He halted, unwilling to venture into that deep cavern, and again started pulling the thread toward him. It gave a little, but only through great effort on his part. He kept tugging, and after a long while, a huge, hideous monster emerged, clutching a rope to which all those traps were tied together. He was the one who instantly dragged down anyone who got caught in them. Each bore an inscription: pride, disobedience, envy, sixth commandment, theft, gluttony, sloth, anger. Stepping back a bit to see which ones trapped the greater number of boys, he discovered that the most dangerous were those of impurity, disobedience, and pride. In fact, these three were linked together. Many other traps also did great harm, but not as much as the first two. Still watching, Don Bosco noticed many boys running faster than others. Why such haste? He asked. There were also two swords representing devotion to the Blessed Sacrament, especially through frequent Holy Communion, and to the Blessed Virgin. There was also a hammer symbolizing confession, and other knives signifying devotion to St. Joseph, to St. Aloysius, and to other saints. By these means, quite a few boys were able to free themselves or evade capture. When the guide was satisfied that Don Bosco had observed everything, he made him continue along that rose-hedged road. But the farther they went, the scarcer the roses became. Long thorns began to show up. Soon the roses were no more. The hedges became sun-scorched, leafless, and thorn-studded. They had come now to a gulch whose steep sides hid what lay beyond. The road, still sloping downward, was becoming ever more horrid, rutted, guttered, and bristling with rocks and boulders. I just can't go any farther. Its towering portal was tightly locked, facing their road. When Don Bosco finally got to the bottom, he became smothered by a suffocating heat. A greasy, green-tinted smoke, lit by flashes of scarlet flames, rose from behind those enormous walls that loomed higher than mountains. He realized they were at the gates of hell. Don Bosco looked up in terror and saw in the distance someone racing down the path at an uncontrollable speed. He kept his eyes on him, trying to identify him. As he got closer, Don Bosco recognized him as one of his boys. His disheveled hair was partly standing upright on his head and partly tossed back by the wind. His arms were outstretched as though he were thrashing the water in an attempt to stay afloat. He wanted to stop, but could not. Tripping on the protruding stones, he kept falling even faster. The next moment he fell tumbling to the bottom of the ravine and crashed against the bronze portal as though he could find no better refuge in his flight. Instantly, 1,000 inner portals opened with a deafening clamor, as if struck by a body that had been propelled by an invisible, most violent, irresistible gale. As these bronze doors, one behind the other, though at a considerable distance from each other, remained momentarily open, Don Bosco saw far into the distance something like furnace jaws spouting fiery balls the moment the youth hurtled into it. As swiftly as they had opened, the portals then clanged shut again. The three lads were sucked into that endless corridor amid a long-drawn, fading infernal echo, and then the portals clanged shut again. At intervals, many other lads came tumbling down after them. Don Bosco saw one unlucky boy being pushed down the slope by an evil companion. Others fell singly or with others, arm in arm or side by side. Each of them bore the name of his sin on his forehead. Don Bosco kept calling to them as they hurtled down, but they did not hear him. Again the portals would open thunderously and slam shut with a rumble, then dead silence. Seeing so many going to perdition, he cried out disconsolately, "If so many of our boys end up this way, we are working in vain. How can we prevent such tragedies?" "Come," the guide insisted. "You will learn much." Benevolent word. "All that is gone forever. Do you just want to see, or would you rather experience these things yourself?" As soon as Don Bosco crossed its threshold, he felt an indescribable terror and dared not take another step. Ahead of him, he could see something like an immense cave, which gradually disappeared into recesses, sunk far into the bowels of the mountains. They were all ablaze, but theirs was not an earthly fire with leaping tongues of flames. The entire cave, walls, ceiling, floor, iron, stones, wood, and coal, everything was a glowing white at temperatures of thousands of degrees. Yet the fire did not incinerate, did not consume. An instant more. More frightened than ever, Don Bosco asked, "When these boys come dashing into this cave, don't they know where they are going?" Thus provoked, divine justice harries them, hounds them, and goads them on, so that they cannot halt until they reach this place. Each other like mad dogs. Others were clawing their own faces and hands, tearing their own flesh and spitefully throwing it about. Just then the entire ceiling of the cave became as transparent as crystal, and revealed a patch of heaven and their radiant companions, safe for all eternity. "Go closer," the guide advised. While Don Bosco viewed the condition of many of his boys in utter terror, a thought suddenly struck him. "How can these boys be damned?" he asked. Last night they were still alive at the oratory. He led Don Bosco away, and they went down through a corridor into a lower cavern, at whose entrance Don Bosco read, "Their worm shall not die, and their fire shall not be quenched." Ferociously as to defy description, helpless and motionless, they were a prey to every kind of torment. Hoping he might be able to speak with them or to hear something from them, Don Bosco drew even closer, but no one spoke or even looked at him. He then asked his guide why, and he explained that the damned are totally deprived of freedom. Each must fully endure his own punishment, with absolutely no reprieve whatever. Here one could see how atrocious was the remorse of those who had been pupils in Don Bosco's schools. What a torment was theirs to remember each unforgiven sin and its just punishment, the countless, even extraordinary means they had to mend their ways, persevere in virtue, and earn paradise, and their lack of response to the many favors promised and bestowed by the Virgin Mary. What a torture to think that they could have been saved so easily, yet now are irredeemably lost, and to remember the many good resolutions made and never kept. Hell is indeed paved with good intentions. "Listen," the guide said, "what would you rather do? Visit hell and save your boys, or stay outside and leave them in agony? Beloved sons of mine from such torments." Above one of them, Don Bosco read this inscription, "The Sixth Commandment." Pointing to it, the guide exclaimed, "Transgressions of this commandment cause the eternal ruin of many boys." It, or did so insufficiently. Others were not truly sorry or sincere in their resolve to avoid it in the future. There were even some who, rather than examine their conscience, spent their time trying to figure out how best to deceive their confessor. Anyone dying in this frame of mind chooses to be among the damned, and so he is doomed for all eternity. Only those who die truly repentant shall be eternally happy. Now, do you want to see why our merciful God brought you here? Bear in mind that even if you did admonish them individually, they would promise, but not always in earnest. For a firm resolution, one needs God's grace, which will not be denied to your boys if they pray. God manifests his power especially by being merciful and forgiving. On your part, pray and make sacrifices. As for the boys, let them listen to your admonitions and consult their conscience. It will tell them what to do. The guide spent the next half hour discussing the requisites of a good confession. Afterward, he exclaimed in a loud voice several times, "Avertere, avertere." He turned and lifted another veil under which this inscription was written, "Radix omnium malorum," the root of all evils, for which they were driven away from their earthly paradise. Here in hell there are also some who, instead of singing hymns and the praises of the little office of the Blessed Virgin, they read secular books. You must insist that obedience to God, the church, their parents, and superiors, even in small things, will save them. He was so moved that he told his friend, "I thank you for the charity you employed with me, and I beg you to help me get out of here." But as soon as they stepped across the last bronze portal, the guide turned to Don Bosco and said, "Now that you have seen what others suffer, you too must experience a touch of hell." "Try it," he insisted. Gripping Don Bosco's arm firmly, he pulled him to the wall. "Only one touch," he commanded, "so that you may say you have both seen and touched the walls of eternal suffering, and that you may understand what the last wall must be like if the first is so unendurable. Look at this wall. 1,000 walls encompass it, each 1,000 measures thick and equally distant from the next one. Each measure is 1,000 miles. This wall, therefore, is millions and millions of miles from hell's real fire. It is just a remote rim of hell itself." The sensation was so utterly excruciating that Don Bosco leaped back with a scream and found himself sitting up in bed. His hand was stinging and he kept rubbing it to ease the pain. When he got up that morning, he noticed that it was swollen. Having his hand pressed against the wall, though only in a dream, felt so real that, later, the skin of his palm peeled off. Don Bosco told his boys, "Bear in mind that I have tried not to frighten you very much, and so I have not described these things in all their horror as I saw them and as they impressed me. We know that our Lord always portrayed hell in symbols because, had he described it as it really is, we would not have understood him. No mortal can comprehend these things. The Lord knows them, and he reveals them to whomever he wills." 3 days later, on May 3rd, 1868, Don Bosco stood before his boys at the oratory in Turin and told them everything. He narrated the vision exactly as it had happened. The boys listened in complete silence. Some wept, others trembled. All of them knew that what Don Bosco had seen was real. The rest of his life. It was the trap of human respect, the trap of caring more about what others think than what God commands, the trap that snares people who make vows before God and then break them to please the world, the trap that catches couples who promise forever and then abandon each other the moment their faith becomes inconvenient. Sins. They were too proud to ask for help. They were too attached to the opinions of their friends to obey God. And in that same vision, hidden among the countless souls tumbling into the abyss, were those who had abandoned their sacred promises, not because they stopped loving each other, but because they stopped loving God first. A warning that when you abandon faith, you abandon everything. And when a husband and wife abandon God together, they fall together into the same darkness, bound by the same snare, dragged by the same force, hurtling toward the same bronze gates that will slam shut behind them for all eternity. Spiritual reading, devotion to the Blessed Sacrament, frequent Holy Communion, devotion to the Blessed Virgin, the hammer of confession. These were the weapons that could cut the snares. These were the means by which souls could free themselves before it was too late. The moment you stop seeking God's grace, you start sliding down that beautiful, rose-covered road that slopes imperceptibly toward the abyss. And by the time you realize where you're going, the momentum's too strong to stop. You're gliding. You're hardly using your feet, and the bronze gates are waiting. Because hell is not a place for people who made mistakes. Hell is a place for people who refuse to repent. And the saddest souls in that place, Don Bosco saw, were the ones who had been given every chance to turn back, but chose to keep running toward the fire. But before he died, he said something that still echoes in the halls of the Salesian Mother House in Turin. He said, "I've tried not to frighten you very much, but if you could see hell as I saw it, you would never sin again." Because Don Bosco also saw something else in his vision. He saw the knives, he saw the swords, he saw the hammer of confession, and he saw that every single soul who used those tools was able to break free. When he woke up, his hand was swollen, the skin peeled away. The physical proof that what he had seen was not imagination. It was reality, and the message was clear. And when they asked him what had happened, he told them the truth. And the same devil, clutching the rope, waiting to drag souls into the abyss. The walls are millions of miles thick, and the fire never stops burning. It was not folklore. It was a documented first-hand account of what happens when souls refuse to repent. And it was recorded, preserved, and passed down through generations for one reason only. So that when we see the beautiful road sloping downward covered in roses, we would recognize it for what it is, the path to hell disguised as comfort. And if we ignore his warning, we do so at our own eternal peril.